Hello, welcome to True's True Crime Corner. If you haven't seen my past video, you should go check it out. It's about Emma Filipoff. It's pretty interesting. If you guys have any other stories that you would like me to follow, then just let me know in the comments below and I will look into it. Other than that, let's get into this story. Everyone already kind of thought that this case should have been solved just from the evidence that's been given, the evidence that's been found. Everyone's thought that this case should have already been solved. The case was stalling already at this point in time. There was really no evidence coming in anymore. There wasn't anyone coming in with any new eyewitness accounts or anything like that. Her mother is in her 90s, so it would be absolutely amazing to get justice, but you know how things can go. I'm not really sure how to say Sarah's last name. There was a bunch of different ways to say it. Greenhalgh, Greenhalgh. Some people said Greenhalgh, some people said Greenhalgh, so I personally am just going to say Greenhalgh. Sarah was awesome. People like to describe her as independent and determined. Sarah was an investigative journalist. She had absolutely no problem getting up in someone's business. You know what I'm saying? She was really good at her job. She was very outspoken. She had no problem literally coming at you if you were doing something wrong. When they found Sarah murdered, detectives had wondered if possibly she had been working on a case recently that had, you know, brought up some bad blood between someone, and maybe they came after her for it. Maybe Sarah had angered the wrong person when investigating the case she was looking into, you know? They maybe also thought it was someone that Sarah had called batshit crazy boy. The case is very, very frustrating because we really just don't know. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty in this story. So, you know, take everything with a grain of salt. Sarah Libby Greenhalgh, born in Potomac, Maryland on March 21st, 1964. Two parents, Sarah Sr. and William. She has one sibling named Kate. When she was young, they moved a lot. Like a lot. They moved to Poolesville, Maryland, 15 miles northwest. Back then, a lot of people rode horses in that area. There was a lot of barns in people's backyards, everything. Horses running around in the fields, you know, doing their own thing. Sarah loved horses and animals. She was an avid animal lover. Like, everyone knew that about her. It was pretty well known about her. If you knew Sarah, you knew that she loved animals. But horses were her all-time favorite animal. You could not get her away from a horse. As she grew up, she really tried her best to keep horses around. She kept horses as close to her as she possibly could. Photography was her secondary love, you know, since being an investigator was her first love. She was really good at photography, though. From the pictures I've seen, wow. Stunning. While young, Sarah received a Brownie camera from her grandmother. It's an old school camera from back in the day. It was small and easy for kids to use. It was a small, easy camera that was for kids, you know. She got it from her grandma and she started using it almost instantly. Aside from riding horses, photography, and just, you know, being an independent child doing whatever she wanted, she was very independent. She loved going off and doing her own thing. She loved doing everything alone, literally. Like, she had no fear for going out and being independent. She was brave as hell. At 12, she took a trip to Africa. Brother. And it was solo. This trip was alone. She took this trip alone. She went alone. I can't emphasize that enough. At 12 years old. Back then, okay. She went to Nairobi, Africa to go see a friend of hers that lived down there at the time. This was just the beginning of her travel life, though. She attended an all-girls college prep school named Oldfield in Glencoe, Maryland. Oldfield was known for its very strong academic program, but it was also known for its very strong equestrian program. It was a pricey school to go to, but price didn't really matter for Sarah. Can't lie, her family was kinda loaded. Sarah's father had sadly passed away in 1994. He was an attorney and associate dean of Georgetown University Law School. It is believed Sarah's passion for the truth came from her father. He was an attorney, so obviously he worked with getting to the truth of things. She eventually left Oldfield and went to Columbia University to study journalism. After she finished her schooling, she moved to the DC area to pursue her journalism career and her photography career. She was a very, very talented photographer. She won many awards and medals. It was insane. She literally, I'll be putting up some of her photos here. She's an absolutely amazing photographer, dude. Like, it was said that she had an absolutely amazing eye for detail. Prince William's Times reported that her pictures were once featured in Time Magazine, Vanity Fair, Washington Post, New York Times, and Fortune Magazine. That's quite the impressive career. With journalism, she worked with a lot of people. Her station was quite broad. She freelanced for the Washington Post, Chronicle of the Horse, and the Winchester Star. In 2012, the Winchester Star is where she had worked at. She wrote about anything from sports to horses to even entertainment and government. She was definitely a force to be reckoned with. She had a good passion for getting to the truth and getting stories out to the public so that everyone knew what was going on. If she needed information, oh, you best believe she would be getting it. She never ever minced any of her words in any of her journalism reports. She was completely fine with making enemies. She quite literally did not care. As long as she got the truth out, that bridge with you could be burned, bitch. She didn't give a fuck. A lot of people said she was a lot better than other journalists out there. Either you loved and respected Sarah, or you were intimidated by her and feared her. Most people saw her as a good person, loyal, caring, kind. You would want her to be your friend, like on your side, rather than be your enemy. Let me tell you that. If she was your enemy, count your days. Count your days. If you weren't her friend, she was quite literally not afraid to put you on blast. If you had done something wrong and she found out about it, the public was gonna know. A lot of people agreed that that exactly is what made her such a good journalist. She wasn't mean or rude, just very direct and intense. Coworkers said that she fought hard to have her work on the front page. She was her own best advocate. And sadly, in July of 2012, she would get to be on the front page, but not for the reasons that she was wanting to be on. Let me provide a little bit more context here so that we're not lost and confused. In 2012, Sarah was 48, living solo in a cottage in Upperville, North Virginia. She was living in a second home on a large property. She was renting from someone else, basically. Property owners lived on that same property, just up in a different house, up on the property somewhere else, you know? Makes sense. Upperville wasn't a big place. Very little crime. Not very busy ever. Not very much traffic. Not many people came through Upperville. It was pretty quiet. July 9th, when everything happened, was a very, very sad day. Very shocking. Very just... I can't even find the words to describe it because it's so saddening. It all started at 8:08 a.m. when an off-duty firefighter reported smoke billowing out of a house, which the house had belonged to Sarah. At 8:22 a.m., a fire crew had arrived on scene and put the fire out. The damage was extensive. The house structure was good, but the inside of the house was not. But that was really the least of their concerns. What really concerned them was the woman's body that was found burned in the bedroom. There was obvious gunshot wounds indicating that it wasn't the fire that had killed her. At first, they had no clue who it was, but eventually they ran the plates on the car outside and quickly learned that it was Sarah Greenhalgh. Her upper body was covered in debris from the fire, and a 9mm was not far from her body. There were several bullet holes in the walls and doors. There were 12 bullet casings lying on the floor around her, suggesting that there may have been a possible struggle for the weapon. Autopsy revealed that cause of death was a gunshot wound to the neck, and that her manner of death was homicide. There was a lot of progress at first. The case was going good. There was a lot of evidence popping up. First, they alerted friends and family about what they had found. When her coworkers were told, they were in the newsroom. A new reporter had came in and asked if anyone had seen Sarah that day. They were very excited at the mention of Sarah. They said yes, they had seen her in fact. People absolutely loved Sarah, so they were absolutely excited to talk about her. Then he broke the awful, awful news to them, which shocked them. It broke them. Nobody could believe it at all. They were heartbroken. Absolutely heartbroken. They just couldn't wrap their minds around how something like that could happen to Sarah. When Sarah Sr. found out, she was on the phone with someone when her friend ran in, frantic, panicking. She relayed the sad news to her, and she broke down. She couldn't understand. She didn't believe it. She felt she would understand more if the fire had been an accident, but it wasn't. If she had been trapped or just anything, just any sort of accident, she would have been able to understand it better. Murder was not on her list of possibilities at all. She did not think it possible, at least not for Sarah. She didn't know anyone that wanted Sarah Jr. dead. There was no one that she could think of, at least not at the moment. By now, I'm sure you've put together that this was not an accident. There were pour marks in the house, indicating that an accelerant was used. 15 feet inside the door was charcoal lighting fluid. Okay. Whoever set the fire knew exactly what they were doing. Other than that, though, there was really little to no other evidence collected from the scene, which is like, what? The gun shells from around her body sadly came back with no trace evidence on them. Luckily, clues were found elsewhere, though. They took a look at Sarah's car and quickly realized that there were bamboo leaves sticking out of the trunk. Like someone had put the trunk down and the leaves got caught in the trunk, you know? The strange thing about it, though, was that Sarah never usually parked there. She parked in a different spot. She never parked in the spot that her car was in. The son of the property owner, named Colin, had come home that morning and told police that it was very unusual. It was a very unusual spot for her car to be in, because she never parked there. She had a different designated spot that she parked in, and it wasn't there. When they opened the trunk, they found her phone, wallet, laptop, keys, etc. Basically anything you would find in a car, but it was all in her trunk. So it was really weird. It would have been normal if the things were just scattered casually around the car. Why the fuck are they all in the trunk? Detectives think that the killer did this in an attempt to take off before inevitably that plan was thwarted and they had to dip. Law enforcement wasted absolutely no time investigating this case. Almost always do in situations like this. I mean, just think about it, dude. What the fuck? They went ahead and looked at 24 hours before she had disappeared. Looked 24 hours through her life just to see if they could find anything that was a tad bit suspicious, that could give them answers to the questions that they had, They have lots of questions that need fucking answered, so of course they're looking. Sarah herself, though, would end up leaving behind a huge clue. Around 11 p.m. on the night of the ETA, Sarah had made a Facebook post. It reads, "Going to be sleeping with the windows open, ... Now if batshit crazy boy would just leave me alone, ... We'll get some much needed rest because tomorrow is Monday and I've got a ton of work to do." That was Sarah's last ever known communication. 9 hours later, she would sadly be gone. So what happened to her? And who is batshit crazy boy? People close to Sarah knew that she kept her dating life private. She didn't really prefer to tell people who she was with at the time. So she really stuck to nicknames, People knew about batshit crazy boy, but didn't, know him. Till one day, her coworker Melissa decided to look through her desk. She had found written on a piece of paper, John from Gainesville, with his phone number underneath of it. There was something else on the bottom of the piece of paper written in a different color of marker, as if she had written on the piece of paper a different time. It said, batshit crazy boy. That's all. Sarah was fairly into true crime. I mean, she's a journalist, man. Of course she's going to be into true crime. She was really, really good at getting to the bottom of things. So true crime was right up her alley. But now to become the true crime, that's a little eerie. When Melissa had found the paper, she knew that it had to be something significant, so she immediately contacted detectives. And detectives were immediately interested with the details that she had just come forward with. They looked further into the note to see what else they could find. They found out that batshit crazy boy was a man named John Carnes. When they went to John's home to question him about his connection to Sarah, he was not home, but they had talked to some of his neighbors. They found out that he had been in quite the heated exchange with Sarah beforehand. Detectives had allowed Melissa to take on the case, journalistically speaking. She eventually went back to the neighbors to ask them what had happened the night of the argument. John had supposedly told Sarah that she wasn't supposed to be there, and he was super, super upset at the fact that she was there. Sarah had apparently called him an asshole. Valid girl. The argument was very, very heated to say the least, which caught detectives' attention. It was quite interesting to them because Sarah was found dead not long after this argument. So they definitely needed to talk to John like right now, like now. They did eventually find him. He was at his job, the auto body shop. He had agreed to come into the station for questioning. He really thought that he had nothing to hide, so he quickly agreed to going in for questioning. His reaction was strange, to say the least. He was very cold about it. He didn't seem shocked at all that his seemingly girlfriend had passed. He wasn't upset, fazed, anything. Like, nothing was going on in this man. What? He said that he knew what this was all about and had even suggested that she took her own life, which was very odd to detectives because they had only mentioned to him that she had died in a fire. Brother. Detectives had asked him about their relationship and why she would make a post like that, like the post she had posted before she inevitably passed away. He explained his opinion on what it was, basically, gaslighting, saying a bunch of BS. Turns out, Mr. Batshit Crazy Boy had another girlfriend. Yikes. And apparently that night, she was on her way to his house. That's why he had gotten so angry at Sarah, was screaming at her to leave, that she couldn't be there. He did not want them to meet at all, which is understandable. We all had a lot of hoes when we were younger. You didn't want them to meet. So, John did say, though, that the other woman never came, so there's no one to corroborate his alibi, Brother, what? Detectives found it quite interesting that he had cuts and scrapes all over his knuckles. He said it was because he's a martial arts instructor, a black belt. They were pretty suspicious of this, but did later confirm that he was in fact telling the truth, at least about being an instructor. They think he's very suspicious, and John's behavior wasn't really helping him either. He was acting odd, cold, very distant. Apparently, Sarah had emailed John that night after she had got home after the fight, and apparently that email was also pretty heated. Despite him saying he had nothing else to hide, he deleted all those emails between him and Sarah. Oh, really? You got nothing to hide, brother, but you're hiding everything? Okay. There was no access to the emails, but we do have this. According to a search warrant affidavit, quote, she, Sarah, listened to all of John's problem, and based on what she told him, he could go away for 25 to life as an accessory due to the knowledge of his admissions of wrongdoing to her. So basically what she was saying was she could go to jail for the shit that he told her. They tried pushing him to get information out of him, but he had asked for an attorney at this point, so they had to release him. They never stopped suspecting John, but they did have to move on to see if they could find out any other things about anyone else. Colin, the son of the property owner I mentioned not long ago, he was a suspect on the list for a little bit, but he took a polygraph test and they quickly cleared him. The case is very tricky. There's just lack of evidence. There's not very much to go off of. There were search warrants served on several electrical devices, but nothing came of it. There was nothing found. So they pivoted to try and find a new suspect. Maybe it could have possibly been someone she did a story on, like I said before. So they did some digging, and one of her stories definitely raised some red flags. Sarah was working on a piece about a man named Russell Ebersol, who was being accused of animal abuse. Yikes, brother. He owned a pet farm with many acres, I guess, and so she was doing a lot of research into that because there had been a claim made that he had been abusing his animals. She was making quite a lot of bold accusations against him, and he really didn't like that. He was living in a very small town, so if she had published her findings on him, it quite literally would have ruined his life. After her articles went live, Russell had called Sarah and verbally berated her. Sarah mentioned to her coworkers not wanting him to know where her home address was in fear that he may come looking for her to try and do something. She even said to some of her coworkers that if she ever went missing or was murdered, that he should definitely be on the suspect list, which is a little crazy. So naturally, they dug into him. They found out Sarah was going to be possibly testifying against him in a case about the animal abuse. He tried suing her for defamation, but it didn't really go anywhere as far as I could find out. He was cleared, sadly, and it wasn't really explained why he was cleared, so I'm guessing that moolah was involved. The case really stalled from here. There wasn't really much for a while, until eventually something new was found. John Carn's ex-wife. Crazy, right? Brother had a wife. What? Her name was Debbie. There were a lot of domestic violence cases between them as well. Like, a lot. Melissa was the one to find this out and quickly told detectives. According to Debbie, John was the kind of person that we all know came across as the life of the party, you know? Charismatic, charming, smooth with his words. A lot of people really liked him, but it was all just a mask. It was not the real him. Eventually, Debbie got to see the real him, and she did not enjoy it. He slowly devolved into being more toxic and abusive towards her. They had separated almost a full year before Sarah's death. Debbie had moved to a townhouse to get away from him, but unfortunately, by the end of the month, he had ended up blowing her phone up with calls, just absolutely blowing it up. He was leaving her creepy, persistent messages minute after minute. Things like, I'm not going to give up on you regardless of what you say. Just listen, I love you, Debbie, and no one else. I will never love again. I will not stop pursuing you. Just creepy stuff like that. She eventually responds, telling him to leave her the hell alone because yeah, dude, fuck. It all was too much for her to handle, that he needed to relax. A few days later, he called her, and for obvious reasons, she didn't fucking answer. 10 to 15 minutes later, her and her son, which was from her first marriage, heard a car door slam outside. The son looked out the window and saw John approaching the house. Debbie had quite quickly called the police. I mean, I would, dude. He started acting very unhinged. He was pounding on the door. He punched out the doorbell. He was stood in front of the window with a hunting knife in his belt, screaming, "You're dead," at them. Debbie had said that the look in his eyes was just pure rage. It was not him in that moment. He was continuously screaming that he was going to kill her, harm her, anything he could, just any harsh, nasty things. And at this point, the police thankfully came. John left reluctantly, but before he did, he slashed her tires and stabbed the side of her car before speeding off in his own vehicle. Debbie had filed an emergency protective order against him basically immediately after this encounter with him. Before their first court hearing, he had called her to tell her that he had burned all of her shit. And he had quite literally burned all of her shit. Anything that was in his vicinity that was hers, he had burned, including her wedding dress, which I doubt she wanted. But I mean, come on. Dude. So her parents quickly got her out of the state. 2 days after the protection order was served, he was involved in a road rage accident. A biker had cut him off and he had somehow got the man to pull over. And when he did, he had got out of his vehicle and just started beating the shit out of this man. Police were called and John was arrested for assault. Debbie told detectives that when she was married to John, he admitted to her that he had committed arson to buildings before and that he had tortured animals. What the fuck? John was ordered to take anger management classes in October of 2011, but in May of 2012, he stopped going to those classes. He had lied to his protection officer about not going to the classes and said that he was going, I'm guessing. When Sarah was killed, he was arrested for like 2 weeks before he was able to post bail. Earlier that year, he had been sentenced 90 days for violating his protective order against Debbie, calling her 23 times in a fucking row, you psycho. 86 of those days were suspended. What the fuck? He only spent 4 of those days in jail. Brother was clearly on a downward fucking spiral when everything was going on. Detectives thought heavily that he could be involved, but sadly there was not enough evidence to make an arrest, though a lot of people strongly disagree on that fact. Sadly, that is all we have for today on this case. I wish I could give you more information, but I sadly cannot. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any more stories that you would like me to follow, drop it in the comments below and I will follow it. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Mwah.